As a chronic people pleaser, I felt like I was never allowed to be wrong. I just thought, I need to be better. I need to work harder. It turns out I was targeting the wrong problems.
You also mentioned that you were in a toxic relationship. What does a toxic relationship make you feel?
You feel significantly more at ease when you're not with that person. If you are constantly concerned about how that person sees you and maybe feel like you're the problem, but this is the only relationship that you really feel that way in, that is a red flag. We're talking about all this hard stuff, right? This feels really heavy, but it's for such a good reason, because I went from that toxic relationship and into my own life now, where my son and I get to just live the life that we want now. I have a business, I have a team. It's because I was able to actually do the rewiring work. And it's a really beautiful experience to just give yourself that gift.
Elyssa Smith is a trauma-informed life strategist who has a TED Talk that is approaching 50,000 views on YouTube. And she talks to executives and CEOs on how to get out of their own way so that they can reach higher. And today we're going to be getting into really more personal things that are happening inside our hearts, inside our minds, inside our businesses that we're not even realizing. But Elyssa knows. Elyssa knows all of this, and we're going to talk to her right now. Elyssa! Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
I'm so excited to talk to you because everybody should know we are very good friends, right?
We are.
And
well, that's what you think, but I'm sorry. Did that come out loud?
No, don't tell me that. Like that would be that's a trigger for me right there. But everybody needs to know that from this point forward, I will not be pronouncing your name accurately, and I want the whole world to know that, because I don't want them to think that is the way that I say it. But I say it Elyssa because that's the Spanish way to pronounce it. But please, everybody, if you meet with Elyssa, just don't call her Elyssa just because I say it. Can you please tell everybody how to pronounce your name?
Elyssa.
Thank you. Okay. That's what everybody should
But
be
I
calling
didn't
you.
realize, I mean, this is the thing. This is what I love about us, is because it never dawned on me that you were pronouncing my name any differently until you introduced me to some people and they started calling me Elyssa.
Yeah.
And I
you're
was like,
why
do
are
they
doing
think
that?
that's my name? I was like, oh, wait, we met through Ina.
Yeah. So I've been telling people like, oh, Elyssa. And then my friends
they're like,
come to
I don't know who
and
it
they're
is.
like, I don't think you're saying her name right. And I'm like, no, I know that. Why don't you know that?
It is a pre-agreed upon standard between the two of us that you say Elyssa.
And I say Elyssa.
Yes.
So welcome, Elyssa.
Thank
to
you
the podcast.
very much, Ina.
Can you please tell everybody what is it that you do right now and who you help right now?
Absolutely. I can't, every time I say it, I can't really believe that this is what I get to do and get paid for it. So I get to help specifically female founders and CEOs work on their limiting beliefs from a trauma-informed perspective, because most people have no idea the depth that things like procrastination, imposter syndrome, perfectionism, people-pleasing, those all have really deep roots most of the time. So I get to help uncover what those roots are. We get rid of them. And then you can just run for your dreams. It's the best feeling.
So in this podcast, I really like to talk to people who have achieved certain levels of success. And it's almost impossible to do that without some self-awareness.
Yes.
Right? Which is why I'm thrilled to have this conversation with you, because I kind of want to start waking up some people.
Ooh,
Okay?
This is
what's going to happen in this podcast. We're going to be waking people up.
Okay.
So for me, and I want you to define what self-awareness means to you, because like you're in that world, like this is your job, right? But I'm going to tell you from like a layman's terms. To me, self-awareness is knowing why we do things and why, like literally why we do things. Like I know a lot of very unself-aware people who, when I ask them, why did you do that? Their first reaction is, oh, because of that external stimuli, right? It's like, oh, why did you not do the dishes when you were supposed to? I'm not talking about anybody in particular, okay? I just want to stress that. I'm not trying to frame anybody. Why didn't you do the dishes when you were supposed to? And they go, oh, because whatever came up, right? But when something becomes a pattern of behavior in our lives, it's really important and incumbent upon us to figure out, like, why aren't we X doing the dishes? Why aren't we going for that big speaking engagement? Why aren't we starting that podcast? If the reason you're giving yourself is because of whatever immediate stimuli, you are not really digging into the why you are doing the things you're doing. So that's what self-awareness is to me. And it seems impossible to me that anybody would be successful without it. How do you define self-awareness?
I love this question, and I love how you defined it. It really is understanding the way that you work beyond, just your default programming. So if your default is I'm a people pleaser or I hear this all the time. So my TEDx talk, right, is about procrastination. And I hear this from people all the time. I'm just a procrastinator. It's just who I am. It's how I work best. But that is just accepting your default. And if you're not looking for reasons why, because it's possible that it's not getting in your way a lot, but particularly for things that you don't want to be doing, if you're not looking deeper, that's that lack of self awareness. So, self awareness for me is just being able to look deeper than your default and really understand what's causing the behaviors that may not be helping you out very much.
So, what is one thing that people normally, like everybody, kind of misunderstands, right? Because people may be hearing this and being like, "Oh, I'm plenty self-aware. I feel like I've done the work, right? Like this is really not for me." What do you think is one of the biggest misconceptions that people have about self-awareness, and they continuously get tripped up by it because they're not aware of it?
hmm So, if there are things that you have historically felt that the solution is just to work harder and push through, and that if you don't accomplish those things, it's because you didn't work hard enough, that is almost never the reason.
Holy, can you hold on? What did you just say to me? Can you say that one more time?
If you are not accomplishing goals and you're interpreting it to mean that you're just not working hard enough, you are almost certainly wrong that that is the reason you're not accomplishing things.
Okay, that's what I'm talking about when we say about waking people up. Because so many people just woke up. Like, what are you talking about? It is because, you know what? I do tend to procrastinate sometimes. It's my fault because I shouldn't be procrastinating because I know that I allotted that time to do that thing. And then I didn't do it because I was browsing TikTok. Like, that's why I wasn't doing it. But it's nothing deep, right? I just procrastinate sometimes. It happens to everybody.
hmm
What do you say to people like that?
The first thing we look at is how often does this happen and what's it stopping you from? If it's only happened twice in your life and it wasn't really at the expense of anything important, not a big deal. Probably is just sort of like I just chose that and I could have worked and I chose not to. But if it's a pattern, and if you notice that in your life, in your business, the really important things like your dreams, your goals, the things you're really reaching for are the things that are impacted negatively by those seemingly small behaviors, we know it's something deeper than just a random choice not to work hard.
Okay. Before we continue to dive into it, I want everybody to know that you didn't just crawl out from under a rock and started talking about this. Like, I want
I
people to
did.
know.
Did you see that? It's outside.
I want people to know, like, you've walked your talk. You have been there. And I want you to kind of paint a picture for what your story is that kind of landed you in doing this kind of work.
Where do I begin? So, as a chronic people pleaser, perfectionist, procrastinator, person who grew up feeling like an imposter, couldn't ever be uh I felt like I was never allowed to be wrong. I had a great childhood. This is what's hard is if you can't point to anything in your past that resulted in you being really messed up, it's really hard to not feel like it's your fault. And so even if you have had something big and difficult happen to you, our brains normalize it. The brain is a beautiful thing and it causes us to be able to survive really awful circumstances and really covert awful circumstances by normalizing. And so it will make you think this is just how everyone grew up, or this is you had it better than so many other people. So I grew up thinking that. And by the time I got to my 20s, I actually was considering not being here anymore because I felt like I was so deeply flawed and no one knew the real flawed me. So it sent me to therapy, thank God. And my first therapist was just kind of like, "What's it like to be angry in your family of origin?" And I was like, "Oh, we are not angry." Because I had this loving family, this great upbringing, and I was like, "Oh no, we no one was ever angry." Because in my mind, anger is this bad thing, right? So I grew up in a perfectionistic household where we never expressed big feelings. I thought I was defective for having them. And so then I go on this journey in my 20s I was collecting people in my life who played into my dysfunction of people pleasing to a fault and ended up in a toxic relationship, ended up in toxic jobs. Finally decided to get a coaching certification because it was just like, I've got to find a way to help people that are hurting the way that I've been hurting. And so, long story, journey of probably about 15 years. Long story short, I ended up having my son, and I was married, and I had this really toxic relationship, and I had birth trauma from and medical trauma from that time period, and also all these years of perfectionism, procrastinating, people pleasing to a fault. And I remember recovering from all those traumas, which I did not recognize as traumas at the time. I wasn't even recovering yet. I was just sitting and I felt like I was sitting in the dark. Like there wasn't even a light at the end of the tunnel because I just thought I need to be better. I need to do more. I need to work harder. And because I physically or emotionally can't right now, it's me. I'm the problem. It's me. So, in that moment where I just really didn't know if I was going to come out of this, I swore, I wrote down in a journal actually, that if I ever made it to the other side of this darkness, this like self inflicted cloud of me just knowing that my laziness was the problem, my distractibility was the problem. That's if I could just work harder and make myself do the things I need to do, then my business would take off, then my baby would do better, then my marriage would do better. We would have more money, all these different things. It was all, I thought, on my shoulders because I wasn't working hard enough. And so I decided if I could get out of this, if I could find a way to work harder and get to the other side, I would map the way out for other women coming after me who also felt the same. It turns out I was targeting the wrong problem. So as I started to research and I started to understand I was going through trauma and I had been through trauma, I started to research brain science behind why can't I force myself to do the things that need to be done to build the business, to do this, to do that. I started to realize that I was barking up the entirely wrong tree. And so then I started really looking at what actually is effective to change your brain in a very simple way so that you can just get out of your own way. And you don't even have to deal with the procrastination and imposter syndrome at that point.
I feel like the hardest part of the self awareness piece is that I didn't really have any big traumas in my life. You know, I've never gone through many awful things that other women have gone through in childhood and adulthood during their teenage years. I had I had a family and I had two sisters, and I went to school and I went to college and I got a degree, and now I have my own business and we're here. Like my life is not that hard. So why would the word trauma even enter in my vocabulary when I'm trying to figure out why I didn't get that podcast episode done last week?
Absolutely. This is actually the question that most people have. If they're not aware of trauma, but they are still having the outward signs that there's something deeper beneath their self sabotage behaviors like procrastination and imposter syndrome and perfectionism, people pleasing, being hard on yourself. All of those are signs that there's something deeper, but many of us feel the same as you. I can't point to the thing. If I had grown up in a war torn country, maybe that would make sense for me, but I didn't. And, my parents are happily married. Like, what's going on? So here's where the different types of trauma come into play. So we have three different types. Now, two of them are more commonly recognized. The third one is my own sort of iteration to help us talk about this. The first one is the kind, this big T trauma. This is the kind we all think of: big, bad things, violent, things, war that should never happen to anyone, being attacked, all of that. The next one that is lesser known, but is being more talked about on a wider basis now is called little T trauma. Little T trauma is smaller, non-violent types of traumas that are still significantly emotionally disturbing. So we're talking bullying, extreme bullying. We're talking maybe you lost a pet and no one helped you navigate your emotions. And then the third type of trauma that I have coined is tiny T trauma. So this is just something, this is a way that I talk about it. It's not, a big concept, but it's the way that I talk about it because we need a way to discuss these smaller things that we experienced as emotional unmet needs in childhood. So if you had a parent, for example, who worked themselves to the bone and never took a break, your little brain would have internalized that as, oh, it's not safe to take breaks. So now we worked really, really hard and then we burn out. And then we work really, really hard and then we burn out. So we have these self-defeating patterns that then emerged from this tiny T trauma. Every single person who has dealt with ongoing, repeated ways of getting in their own way, the self-sabotage stuff, has some semblance of tiny T trauma.
Okay. What does that what does that mean for me? Like what kind of tiny trauma could have been in my life that I didn't even register as trauma?
It could be that you got made fun of. I had a woman that I was talking to last week where I had just interviewed on her podcast actually, and our little drop pull aside conversation that was not recorded was her sharing with me a very vivid memory of walking down the middle school hallway and someone making fun of her appearance. And she doesn't have other memories of bullying, but she had another memory then of her sisters kind of making fun of her when she started to speak up. And she said, "Could that be the reason that I find it hard in my business to articulate my messaging and I want to hide from social media?" And I said, we'd have to do a session to be sure, but that is the kind of thing that can have a direct impact on your business and life today.
But that just happened one time. Why would that be such a big deal? And by the way, I want everybody to know that um, I'm, I'm, I'm helping the conversation along because I am not trying to undermine these
We're gonna
feelings
get in a
at
fight
all.
here in just a
But
second.
I want the reason I'm asking these questions in this way. I want everybody to know that I want Elyssa to be answering things that might be in your head. But I by no means am I trying to minimize what that pain is like because I have felt it myself. Okay. So I wanted to say that out loud so people don't think that I'm just a jerk who's like, that doesn't make any sense. What are you talking about? But these may be things that may be going through your mind. Like, why is that even a big deal? And why is that stopping me now, 30 years later?
Everybody's brain handles input differently, but once it classifies the input as traumatic, everybody's brain does the same thing, which is to go into immediate survival mode. Now, it does not matter if it happened one time, if it happened multiple times, if it was a big T, little t, or tiny t. If your brain took it in as trauma, they actually have proven through brain scans that there's like a little mark that happens on the actual brain matter itself that marks when that trauma happened. And so we know that the body kind of keeps a record of it. There's actually a great book called The Body Keeps the Score about this concept that your brain will remember. And so while that same scenario that this woman was telling me about last week, where she's walking down the hall and somebody said something and then her sisters would pick at her when she spoke, maybe those things would have happened to you or to me, and our brain would not have taken it in as trauma. But Dr. Peter Levine is a trauma specialist, and he defines trauma as anything that overwhelms the senses to the point that your brain has to start coping in an unhealthy, unhelpful way. And so when your brain goes into survival mode, which means that your right brain, this is your survival brain, your right brain sort of, I call it the right brain hostile takeover because it does the same thing for everyone's systems, regardless of what the trigger was. And so the right brain takes over, which means that your left brain, your logic, your rationality, all of your higher level decision making is not available in that moment. And so when your protector parts are rushing to the scene because your right brain says, whoop, there's a big, a big thing happening. It's very unsafe right now. The world is an unsafe place is the main message of trauma. It doesn't matter what size the trauma is. If your brain took it in as trauma, it will have that message that the world is an unsafe place. I better protect myself.
Okay. I remember there was one time when I booked a session with you because I couldn't stop crying and I
Mhm.
didn't know why.
Yeah.
I to this day I don't remember what that session was about. All I remember is I could not stop crying and it was like ugly crying, like bawling, and I could not figure out why. And you acted like a detective during that session trying to figure out why, like, what was the trigger, what was getting me to cry so much. And you found it. And I was extremely impressed because I wasn't giving you anything. I
That's true.
wasn't, I wasn't, I wasn't trying to like, well, maybe it could be this, or maybe I was like, no, none of those things hit. Like, no, none of that. I don't know why. Yeah, but have you? No, I don't know. I don't know. I wasn't giving you anything. And you like, I remember like seeing you through the Zoom, right? It's like, okay, like with a notepad, like we're figuring this out. And at the end, when we discovered it, I'm like, whoa, like I had no idea this was inside of me. How did you do this? And you're like, yeah, I'm a trauma detective. Like
That's what I do,
that's
man.
what I do. Like that is what I do. And I'm like, have you ever been with like anybody that you can't figure out? And you're like, well, not most of the time, like I can see, like I can find it, right? Even if the person can't,
Yeah,
right?
I honestly, this is not to toot my own horn, it's just to talk about the brain science of it. I honestly don't have any memories of me not being able to do this and find out what the actual problem was. And I'll tell you, the only clues that I need are when did this start? Where did it start happening now? Because what you tell me about the situation that kind of set you off in whatever behavior is not desirable, ugly crying the whole day, or, wanting to stay in bed all day because you burned yourself out. Doesn't matter what the behavior is. You tell me what the behaviors are now. I'll ask you targeted questions about things that I may be the only person between the two of us that I know to ask about things in the past. And then I can directly link it. And once we do, that's the beautiful thing. Then we can just start rewiring the brain right there.
And that has just been amazing to watch you work in that way. So before I leave this topic of trauma that we didn't even know was there, and like really not knowing why we procrastinate and what are the things stopping us in our business, before we leave that topic, I kind of want to leave everybody with just like a brief like checklist. Like if you're listening to this and you know that you have been wanting to do something for a long time and you're just not, and every time that you try is just a false start after false start. It could be starting a podcast, it could be getting your a higher level client, it could be increasing your prices, it could be just quitting your job and doing something else, like something that you've been really wanting to do that it would completely change your life, and you just continue to procrastinate from doing it. What do you think is like the next 3 steps that they need to be doing or thinking about to get themselves out of their own way and actually start seeing some change in their life?
Absolutely. We need to include on that list too. This is a big one that keeps coming up is trouble delegating or hiring your team. So trouble hiring and trust issues. I have a lot of entrepreneurs that'll say like, I just have trust issues and I can do it better myself, et cetera, et cetera. The first step is to notice the behaviors that you don't want to continue. If everything is serving you fine, and if it doesn't bother you that your only motivation is working harder and that you feel lazy and that if you're taking a break and that causes a burnout pattern, that's fine. This is not for you. You continue on your journey. And if you want to stay in that burnout pattern or if you want to just keep trying to beat it with your current tactics, that's fine. So this is not for everyone. But if you know that you keep yourself playing small, or if you get to the place where you're about to succeed and then you're not able to finish the rest of it, a project or a plan or a strategy, if you are in that place where you know that it's impacting your ability to actually reach out and grab the dream, it always feels like it's just beyond your reach. That's what you want to observe. What is the thing that is causing you to not be able to grab onto the important, really beautiful, deep dream that you have? And if you just believe it's working harder, that means that you need to observe, okay, if the answer wasn't just to work harder to get that dream, then what would the answer be? Well, I need to, stop doubting myself so much. I need to stop comparing myself. I need to, have an actual plan that I follow. Whatever those things are. So identify the things that you wish you would be able to do to get to that goal so that it would just happen. No more messing around between here and like, oh, it's this long journey to this goal. No, like what are the things that right now would just make it happen? And so if those things lie within you, that's the first stuff you got to look at is what is stopping you from doing those things. And a lot of times again, I don't recommend doing this journey in isolation because if you do start to lift up the cover and look underneath and figure out what's under there, it can lead to ugly crying days.
Hmm.
When
Right.
you're doing this work, you need to be well supported, right? So really start to notice what are the behaviors that are getting in my way. Start to make a plan for how you're going to support yourself as you begin to discover and uncover. And then on a daily basis, regulate your nervous system. And I have a really easy way to do that. And I'd love for people listening to just walk away right now with this particular skill and plan. It's called my 3S framework. I spent the first 5 or 6 years of working with my clients trying to figure out the commonalities of how could we create a safe, calm place for the nervous system so that the brain comes out of survival mode and you can actually use your higher level productivity and decision making rather than, I mean, because if you're procrastinating all the time, if you're stressed all the time, if you're just running from one thing to the next, you're right brain heavy. You're out of balance and your right brain is running the show. Could you imagine how successful, productive, and efficient you could be if you had both sides of your brain balanced? So this is my quickest way. The 3S framework is to get your brain, both sides of the brain back in balance for at least a little bit of time so that you can actually access your higher level thinking, calm your body and your brain, and do your very best work. And this will help you get out of your way to get after that dream. The first S, safety. What I mean by this is no matter what's going on, whatever is stressing you out in the moment, take a break. Literally, go take a bathroom break, go walk outside for 30 seconds. And I want you to take 3 deep breaths. They don't really know why it's 3, but 3 deep breaths will reset your survival brain for a few minutes. And what it's doing is your survival, like, have you ever tried to talk yourself out of being stressed or like nervous? And you're just like,
All
it's
the
fine.
time.
Yeah,
All
right.
the time.
It's like, stop stressing about this. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. We tell ourselves that a lot.
I,
If
I,
we're,
I try to imagine myself not feeling stressed and just trying to like copy and paste that feeling into the now.
yes,
It never
it doesn't
works.
work. Your survival brain does not jive with words. It just doesn't understand words. You can't talk yourself out of this response and it's a physiological response. It's not just like thoughts, it's a whole body experience. So, slow breathing communicates in an active way to your survival brain that you're not actually running from a wild animal because it thinks every threat is life or death, gonna fight an animal, gonna run away, we're gonna do something that is gonna save our lives right now. And that's why you get like a rapid heart rate or you like hold your breath or like your breathing speeds up. You might get to tense muscles or aches and tension in your shoulders and neck. That's all because you're preparing. Your body thinks you're gonna fight something. So if you're in your business every day acting like you're gonna fight something, you are not gonna be very effective. So take those 3 deep breaths. It sends a message. The brain says, oh, if we're able to slow down and take these breaths, I guess we're not running for our lives right now. The second S is self nurturing. So, we all hear self care. It's kind of a fluff term now because it's like bubble baths. Screw that.
Yeah,
Screw bubble
can
baths.
we just put that on a t-shirt? I'm gonna have like merch.
Yes,
Screw bubble
screw
baths.
bubble baths. Forget about that.
No.
Find your trauma instead.
Yes.
It's gonna be our new line.
The back of
Our new
the,
line.
the hat is going to be like, I have trauma. Like trauma is a thing for me.
Trauma is a thing. So I like to call it self-nurturing for that reason because it gives it a slightly different understanding. So when I say self-nurturing, I literally just mean nurture your 5 senses. If you have a cup of tea, that hits 4 out of 5 senses. Like, go easy on yourself. Don't try and do everything. You don't need a spa day. Just do something that lets your body know it's being taken care of. If your body then communicates back through your hands, through the sense of touch, through your nose, through the sense of smell, through taste, it's a nice tasty snack that you have, through sensations that feel good. If it communicates that back to the survival brain has 2 reasons to believe that you are not running for your life and you should have access to your higher level brain at that point. Here's the third one. This is the one that most people don't do. Okay, so this is a challenge to anybody who's listening. I want you to do this today. Reach out to a safe, supportive, validating person. Most of us have great people in our lives. And if you're a high achiever, you probably don't lean on them very much because we don't want to be a burden. We feel like we might be judged for our weaknesses. It feels stupid. We feel stupid for having a big emotional feeling because we never learned how to be validated and how to validate ourselves in those difficult times. So reaching out to someone can literally just be sending a text to someone sending them a joke, sending them a funny meme or, like a reel or something, and just interacting with them. It could also be that you're kind of telling them what's been so stressful. So it doesn't really matter to your brain. If you're isolated, if you don't do this third step, it doesn't matter how many deep breaths you take, it doesn't matter how many cups of tea you make, it will always believe you've been siphoned off from the herd and you are in danger of being picked off by a predator. But these three things together are the powerhouse decision-making process. This is how you get to your higher level thinking. And this will help your process of self-awareness develop. And then that will eventually lead to beautiful self-validation and you become unstoppable.
Back in your story, you mentioned something that I don't want to just breeze right through, which is being in a toxic relationship. And I feel like people need to hear this because we're all like presumably like a lot of people who are listening right now, they are in a relationship currently, and if they are going for their dreams and they're going for their like really develop that self-awareness and become successful, and they feel like their relationship is not working for whatever reason, because it's toxic, because the person that they're with is not being supportive, because they feel themselves like they're not doing their job in their relationship, right? Like there's something there in that external like situation that we find ourselves in a relationship. And I want to know, how did you know that you were in a toxic relationship? Because you just came and said, I was dealing with all these things and I thought the problem was me and I'm researching the science so that I can get myself out of it. Where did that toxicity that was around you come into play?
I really thought in that relationship that if I could just communicate better, if I could just be less needy, if I could just be more forgiving, then the relationship would be better. But the problematic thinking in that is that it's only on one side. And if we look at the historic patterns, so for me, when I stepped away from that relationship and got some serious therapy to help me understand what I had been through, I started to see that this was a pattern of me being hurt over and over again, emotionally and psychologically, in ways that diminished who I was. My identity was getting chipped away at. And to the point that I really didn't even know what I wanted anymore or what I liked. And whether or not you're in a relationship that's actually abusive in those ways, that actually brainwashes you, you have to look at how are you responding when you're hurting. And one way that I like to talk about this is that there are two different kinds of pain in life in general. And if you're listening and you work out, you might relate to this example. But basically, when you're working out, in order to build bigger muscles, you have to work out your muscles in a way that causes little micro tears. That's why you get sore. So it's your body's repairing process that grows the muscle. So the body says, "Oh no, we have these tiny micro tears. We must need stronger muscles here. So let's go build the stronger muscles here." So that is a really healthy, still painful, but really beautiful, strengthening, resilient type of pain. But there's another kind of pain, and if you've ever been injured, you'll know that there is a type of pain that means you're injuring yourself. You are becoming damaged from that pain. That is not the kind of pain that your body will just come in and repair overnight with some sore muscles. You might have to get surgery, it might be bigger. It's the same in any other situation in life. If you're in a relationship and you are dealing with pain, that is causing you to become more yourself, more articulate, more calm, more peaceful, more bold, more confident, and you're using the difficulties in the relationship to become more yourself, that's beautiful. But if the difficulties in the relationship are causing you to doubt yourself, to not believe your version of reality, to feel like you need to overwork so that the other person can remain comfortable. Because the thing I always used to think is, well, I'm tough. I can handle it. He can't. So I'll just carry the load of this and I'll just do everything with the kid and I'll just do all the, research and I'll just whatever it is because he can't handle it. If that is the kind of pain you're experiencing and it causes you to diminish, the real needs and desires and dreams that you have are getting smaller. That is injury pain in your life.
How do you know if you are in a toxic relationship? You just said a few ways that people can kind of tell, but I kind of want to create a checklist for people who are listening, right? What does a toxic relationship make you feel?
Less confident when you're with the person. That is the number one thing because most of the women, so I help a lot of women who end up needing my help in their toxic relationship to for them to like reestablish their identity and figure out what they want and set the boundaries they need. And the one thing that all of us have in common, we who are high achievers, is that we tolerate a lot of garbage from the relationships in our lives, not necessarily your primary relationship, but sometimes, but also bosses, also family of origin members, also, coworkers and whatever else it is, team members that you hire. We tolerate a lot of garbage because we can and because we are tough enough and that's how we got to where we are. So if you want to know if you're tolerating that or if you're being exposed to that, number 1 is that you're going to feel less confident about your decisions around this person. Number 2 is that you're gonna doubt yourself in general and whatever your like I said earlier, your version of reality, you're gonna second guess whether you're remembering things correctly. You're going to also notice that you feel significantly more at ease when you're not with that person. And if you are constantly concerned about how that person sees you and maybe feel like you're the problem, but this is the only relationship that you really feel that way in, that is a red flag.
Do you think that's something that successful women tend to gravitate towards these kind of relationships? Is there a pattern that you have seen in women who want to really thrive, that the relationships are just not measuring up to what they should deserve, so what they should be accepting and being available for?
It really depends on how much inner work they've done. So for me, I was an extremely independent, successful young woman when I got into my toxic relationship. I was headed for the stars. I was absolutely competent, capable, on my way to a really powerful career. I was a killer mom. Like I was really, really great at a lot of things. And the way that I got there though is through sacrificing myself. And we get accolades for that, especially as women. We get accolades for, okay, from being mindful and demure and, putting our own needs to the back, especially if you're a mom, especially if you have your own business or if you're juggling a lot, everyone becomes very in awe of our ability to tolerate hardship.
Yeah, of being able to do it and make it look
You
easy.
can do it all and make it look easy. But if your relationship was formed before you had self-awareness about how you go about your success. So a lot of women, we become very successful and or we're on our way to becoming successful and then we hit a ceiling and that's when we do our self-awareness journey. And so we go on this journey and we find, "Oh wow, I've been a perfectionist and I need to let go of that. These are the parts of me that can't go with me to the next level." If you picked your relationship before that point in your life, which most of us choose a relationship young if you want a primary relationship, then there's a solid chance that you picked your relationship out of the same ability to tolerate hardship and to carry most of the load. So it sounds very doomsday. What's actually very cool is that you can rewire the parts of your brain and change within the relationship. And what's scary for a lot of the women that I help is, what if that person can't go with me? And that is a difficult part of the journey, but it's actually, I've seen it done really, really well, where both people kind of have an awakening and they're able to grow. But it's really dependent on us figuring out what did we base our choices on? Did we base it on our ability to diminish ourselves and take on more pain in order to balance the relationship? Or is the relationship based on equity and emotional intimacy and both people being allowed to have big feelings and both people being allowed to dream?
So how do you go about starting to resolve that? Because I feel like as type A, we can do it all and we can handle everything. We kind of want to just take ourselves to therapy, take ourselves to work with a coach, fix ourselves because we can definitely take care of our side of the street. And maybe, again, by working harder, thinking smarter, and just doing all the things we need to do, maybe we'll be able to solve this one sidedly. That's what our instinct wants to tell us to do. What do you tell us to do?
That is the right place to start. And here's why. If you start giving yourself the gift of validation, the gift of real deep self awareness, and having the space and the self nurturing to have that be a gentle process for you, what I have seen is that the women who are working through these things, especially if they're also scaling their businesses at the same time, there becomes a point where they just know what they want and what they need, and they become so well able to ask for it. Not out of a trigger, not out of a, well, I read it in a book, so we better sit down and do this. It's not from there. It's from this deep knowing of their true self and their true needs. So it does start with looking inwardly, not just trying to like check off the healing list, right? Not just like, okay, well, I went to therapy and I did this and I worked on my trauma and I did. No, it's very much from like, what isn't working for me right now? Who do I need to bring in to help me with those things in order for me? Because we're not supposed to do this in isolation. It's not possible in isolation. You absolutely can't begin this journey unless you've got people that are in it with you and supporting you and reflecting back to you the love and validation that you need to learn to reflect back to yourself. Because every time you choose to take on more pain and to stuff down your needs, it's an unloving choice toward yourself. And most of us are just trained to do it. I was decades and decades. So unlearning that and rewiring the brain around that requires gentleness. It requires other people to reflect love back to you where you're not feeling it for yourself. And once you begin that very gentle, loving process, the relationship ends up taking care of itself one way or the other, just in a natural, logical kind of progression.
Unless the relationship with somebody who is just completely incapable of growth and seeing what's really happening and
Yes.
understanding. And um, how do we know the difference? How do we know if we're in a relationship that can be impacted by us doing the self work? And how do we acknowledge that, even after we're doing the work, this still seems like an uphill battle and maybe
Mm,
something else needs to be done?
yep. You will know. That has been true for me. It's been true for every woman that I've ever talked to about this. I had a coach one time that told me every person in a relationship that is toxic or maybe could be toxic needs to turn over the amount of stones that they need to turn over in their seeking to keep the relationship and to heal the relationship. And there comes a point when it's the last stone and you'll just know. But that can be so scary at the beginning that I highly recommend that if there's anybody listening today and you're feeling your heart beating fast, you got that terrible feeling in the pit of your stomach, like, oh my gosh, I might have to end my relationship, and your brain is jumping to the conclusion. I just want to encourage you to come back to right now. All you need to do is the next right step because we don't know. We don't know what happens after you turn over that last stone. It might be there's a sudden breakthrough for all we know. So you have to just stay in the moment and figure out what is going to be the soul soothing next step for you.
There, I have to share this because our sessions are just the most transformative. Like, it's so funny that we can meet for 90 minutes and me feeling like basically like I'm picking at scabs, and then 48 hours later there's a breakthrough, and I trust that process. And I remember us talking about this because I've always had so many issues with self validation and actually self soothing, and I've always just looked externally for any sign that I have value. And I can't say that I'm completely cured right now. There's something that I am actively working on. But one of our breakthroughs in our last session was, and this is so silly because I've heard this so many times before, but it didn't hit me until this time, that you can treat yourself the way that you would treat a friend who's going through a hard time. And I didn't get that until literally our last session. I have been on this earth for 43 years, doing the work, going to therapy, having had multiple sessions with you where we've talked about this, hearing podcasts, and everybody telling me, yeah, you need to figure out how to self-love is the like the buzzword. Self-love and self-care, self-love and self-care. But whenever I hear self-care, I think bubble bath. I'm like, I don't like bubble baths. I'll do that every once in a while, but that's not what self-care means to me. And in our final session, I just had this like moment where I was like, wait, are you telling me that if I do something nice for myself out of the energy that I want to like treat myself like a wounded bird, right? Like, hey, my friend is having a hard time. My friend would appreciate this little gift or this little gesture. Or maybe my friend would appreciate a chocolate chip muffin this morning. My friend would appreciate I actually went to a store with my son, with my 7-year-old, and I told him, I have a friend who's hurting right now. Let's try to find a gift for her that would make her feel good. And I found this the softest blanket you've ever seen. And James loves that blanket. My little son loves that blanket now because it's like the hurt blanket now. It's like what we use to make our friends feel better. And I bought that blanket and I cherish it. It was my first time experiencing that somebody had my back and that somebody was not an external person, that it was actually me who had me. And that blanket means so much to me. And I remember sending you a message like, I never expected a gift to myself to feel this way because I always felt that if a gift is not coming from someone else, then it's not a gift. It's just me buying myself stuff. So I wanted to say, number one, thank you for that breakthrough that it is possible to self soothe and to self validate. And when we're talking about toxic relationships, we need to be able to tell ourselves what just happened in this relationship is not okay, right? What you just heard that person say to you is not okay for that person to say that to you. And if nobody else is going to tell us that, we need to have that chip. So how I went through a whole session with you where I realized that. Can you summarize it for us if there's women out there who are feeling like, validation is self-validation is just not a thing for me. I talk to myself like with so many swear words and so many like I
Yes.
just treat myself badly just because I'm tough on myself. What would you say to a woman like that about the power of self validation?
So, what every woman needs to understand, every person needs to understand, is that the second that you learn, the second that your little child brain learned in early childhood, for some people, it was like immediately when they were born. For some people, it was a little later. For some people, it had to do with families. For some people, it didn't. Maybe it had to do with a teacher or something. But the second that we learn that it's possible for any of our needs to go unmet, that little true self gets covered by protector parts. And those protector parts, that's what builds our business. That's what builds our family and chooses our partner and parents our children. Those are the parts of us that learned to cope, believing that if we could just be better, do more, and work harder, then our needs would get met. That's why our drive is so focused around working harder. So if your drive is around working harder and rest feels lazy, you have a self validation problem. And that's not your fault. Because if you didn't get validated or get shown how to validate yourself in childhood as early on as possible, you would have never developed that. Your protector parts take the place of that. So it's procrastination. It's feeling like an imposter, feeling like you're never measuring up to the next person, feeling like, gosh, I'm so relieved when this person is gone, but I just need to work harder so that I like it when they're home with me. That kind of that's how it ties into the toxic relationship status. It's like, you know, I'm so relieved when this person is gone and I feel guilty for that. I'm so relieved when I don't have to carry this person's load and I feel guilty, like shame around that because I probably should be able to carry more. And so when your shame and guilt is around not being able to do more and carry more, that means that you have a relationship with that true self that was covered up by the protector parts that needs to be repaired. Once it's repaired, the amount of joy and calm peace that everything you do can be derived from is unlimited.
It seems like that's why tied so much to a success of our business. Um, because if I can't figure out how to get the things done that I want to get done and do them from a place of joy and understand if I'm procrastinating, why am I doing that? Why am I getting in my own way? Then I'm just going to continually perpetuate those patterns, just continuously trying to work harder and just call myself really bad names when nobody's looking
And burn out so
and
fast
burn out.
all the time.
There is a point that I really want to drive home, and that is that as powerful women, which we are, because we are going for our dreams because we have really big goals, it's really important to feel supported, right? It's really important to have somebody in our lives that is like it's in it with us. And sometimes we want that person to be our romantic partner, right? We want that person to be our biggest cheerleader and like our biggest everything, right? I just want to like lay it out really clear. Do we need this person in our lives to be that full, whole encompassing, supportive person? Or are we expecting too much? Or is there kind of somewhere in, if there's somewhere in between, right? Where that person can be a supporter, but not necessarily like maybe like the dream that we have in our minds. Or am I showing my own trauma and my own biases here? What is the right expectation to have of our partner?
So I'm not a relationship expert. I just want to give that caveat that disclaimer. This is not, the main part of everything that I do in all my certifications. However, from what I know and what I have studied and what I have been trained in through inner child reparenting, what matters most for your true self to become available, which is the fastest way to scale your business, your true self becoming available, safe, you being able to set up safe boundaries around yourself, safe people around you, all of that. So what I know about that is that anyone who has access to you in the most intimate, close way, they don't need to be the person that understands. For example, one of the things in my world is like nobody understands funnels. If they don't have an online business, they don't know what a funnel is. They're like, my sister's like, it's the thing that you bake with in the kitchen. I'm like,
Right.
yeah, okay. So you don't need a person that understands the ins and outs of your business unless they're working in the business. And then I hope they do. But if they're not working in the business, you don't need someone who understands and appreciates every single detail about the business, right? Though you could, but you should have those people. That's I do wanna say that. You need those people. You need your squad, your besties. You need your people that really understand, "You guys, I was expecting this many people to come in through my lead magnet and they did not," or whatever it is. You need those people. But your partner needs to be because our partner is typically the person who has the most access to us and who is the most intimately connected with us. That person needs to be 100% safe. What I mean by safe is that they never judge, they never invalidate. There is a level of equanimity to the relationship where both people carry an equal part of the load, even if the load looks different. And there needs to be an emotional safety with that person to where I can come home at the end of the day and be like, I know that not a lot of this is going to mean a lot to you, but, or, we work from home, right? We're online entrepreneurs. So you get done with your workday and you go to that person, you say, I know this is not going to mean a lot to you, but can you be excited with me for a second? Because I just launched the heck out of this product or whatever it is. And that person's correct response, if they're holding space for you, is, oh my gosh, you just launched the heck out of that. That's what validation is. It is me seeing you and seeing your emotion and interpreting it in a way that lands with you. So you are having an ugly crying day. If I'm your partner, I'm saying, wow, I see you're really sad. Is there anything I can do for you? That is a partner who's attuned. The word you want is attuned. You want to be attuned with your partner. You want them to be attuned with you. And that means that they are looking out for how they can connect with you rather than trying to push you away into your own corner when you have needs.
And I just think it's so important for everybody to hear that the relationships that you're putting around you, right? The squad that you're building. We've talked about building squad, not in this podcast. Like I've talked about this in previous episodes, that it's so important to have that group of people that understand everything and that will talk to you about funnels and understand what's going on with your lead magnet and will be willing to review it with you. And like that squad is still so important, especially as we continue to elevate in our businesses. We need to have people to talk to about that. And I am very, very fortunate to have you in my squad. We talk like every single day
All the time.
about everything that goes on in our lives all the time. And I only wish for this type of friendship for every successful woman out there, for everybody who's listening right now, who's like, wait a minute, I don't really have anybody to really talk to about this. I'm just going to give everybody a quick tip, and I want you to give people a tip too about this, about where to find these people. But in all the programs that you have joined, in all the masterminds, was there anybody as an attendee to those masterminds who actually like jived with you, or who was doing something cool or something similar, or just they were doing something that you just want to reach out and say, hey, I love it that you're doing that. Can we like have a coffee chat someday and just chat a little more? And that's how you start to build and try to find those people that you're gonna click with, because clicking is a thing, right? Clicking with the right energy, with the right goals, and wanting to elevate each other without anybody paying anybody, right? Like just support, because we're here, we're in it together, and we need this kind of support. So I'm gonna encourage everybody to just look back at Facebook groups that you are in, at masterminds that you have joined, at courses that you have taken, and see if there's people in the audience that you think they're just cool, and just reach out and see what's up. Do you have a tip for how to find these people? Because actually, you are the person who came up with the idea for our little squad.
Yes. Well, I mean, the really wonderful thing is your squad members can come from anywhere, right? Your biz besties. You and I became friends because I hired you as my business strategist coach. And then we just realized how much we jived, and I just wasn't shy about never letting you out of my life. So those people that you're like, I just like to be in her space. It's for me, I've connected with people I really admire. I mean, absolutely. I went to a great retreat earlier this year, and several of the ladies and I connected, but it's so fast and you're at such, you're so busy at those things. But I just got their information and then we connected on Zoom chats later. So that's definitely good. As good as that is, it absolutely can bring you to the next level with your connection. And in addition to that, look for people that you look up to as a mentor. So, several of the women that I have admired and looked up to as mentors, I just wanted to be in their space, stay in their space, and they've become friends from that. So really don't be shy. Message Ina. And if you look up to her, message her. She's a great person to be in the space of. Become friends in the DMs. Give shout outs in your stories to people, to authors, people whose books you love, whose courses you took. Really make the connections whenever you think of it, like, gosh, I just really loved this book. I really loved this podcast episode. Put it in your Instagram stories, put a post on LinkedIn about how it impacted you. And that's a great way to connect with other high level entrepreneurs.
Yeah. And I do want to give a shout out to the book that started our little
The
squad.
book that started it all.
Right? Is
Yes.
Rachel Rogers, We Should All Be Millionaires. I actually have
Fantastic.
the link to that book right in the show notes. So go and get it like now and
100%.
read the whole thing. But there is
Yes.
an entire chapter about finding your squad.
Yes.
And so Elyssa was the first one who was like, we should have a squad. I'm like, I think I know some people. And here we are. It's been only, can you believe it's only been
Only
1
a year,
year?
but we've all gone through I mean, we have gone through people changing niches, people having six-figure launches for the first time, people having major surgeries, people having parenting stuff going on, people having losing and gaining relationships. Like, in 1 year, our little squad has gone through so much, and we have had each other's back through all of it, and it's been so incredible.
So, Elyssa, any final words? There are women out there who are listening to you and saying, like, I didn't realize I may have trauma that I didn't even know, and I'm probably going to need a detective to uncover it. My relationships are just not exactly where I want them to be. I've just not known what to do. So now I just got some ideas. So they're like listening, their brain is full right now. What would you say to them? Like right now, they're in this state where, like, I need to do something. I need to change something. I need to do something about my life.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, for sure, reach out to me if you want. Like, if you really, if I could be helpful to you at all, reach out to me. Get in my DMs. Send me a message because I want to just encourage you. The biggest thing I want you to know if you're listening and this just kind of like tipped your box of rocks out all over the ground and everything's messy. I just want you to know, no thing that is in your way, nothing that you've been doing, all your behaviors that have maybe gotten in your way or the relationships you've chosen, none of it's your fault. This is how we get programmed at a young age that this is how we cope with life. So it's not your fault. So I want you just to relax any self-judgment that you have as a result of like, here I'm in this mess and I can't get my dreams and it's my own fault. It's not. This is just always how it was. Anyone who's been through what you've been through would be experiencing the same thing now. And the second thing is you can rewire this. It starts with those 3 S's that I mentioned. It starts with the self-awareness and it starts with finding the right people, your squad. If you need a coach, a therapist, someone like me to lead you through, really get to the detective work. And then once you have that, the rest of it sort of releases in its own time. And it's a really beautiful experience to just give yourself that gift.
And I can vouch for that because I keep signing up for sessions with you because every single time I just discover something new about myself that I didn't realize was there. And this is after me being self aware and doing all the work and being to multiple sessions with therapists and with conversations with our squad. And like, there's still so much to uncover and why I'm stopping myself from doing things. So I highly recommend that everybody needs to have Elyssa in their life. So if they want to do that,
Yes. Well, and one more thing I was gonna say too is we're talking about all this hard stuff, right? This feels really heavy, but it's for such a good reason because I went from that toxic relationship to, moving away from that and into my own life now where my son and I get to just live the life that we want now. I have a business, I have a team, I'm like heading towards all of this amazing stuff. It's because I was able to actually do the rewiring work. The hardest part, the part that takes the longest is coming to the point where you realize something has to change. Once you realize something has to change, the rest of it goes fairly quickly, especially comparing to the decades that we went without the self-awareness. So it gets really, really good and it gets really good really fast when you can just decide, I'm going to go and do this thing. And then you don't stop yourself and you just go do it. And you're just like on that stage or you're just I mean, this is my life. I'm talking about my life this year. You're just on the stage that you've always wanted to be on. You're just in that TEDx talk that you've always wanted to give. You're just on these podcasts that you've always listened to. I mean, you can just go do those things once you're not in your own way. Okay, that was my plug for joy and happiness.
but before you move on from your blog, I have to say that Elyssa, you are such a unique person in that I have never seen anybody make incredible 10x leaps the way that you have. And I just encourage everybody, even if it's still from like a research perspective as an education, to go and follow you because they're gonna see that you don't have a baby step mode. You go and you set a big dream and you go after it. And it is because of the stuff that we're talking about today. It's because of this work that those 10x leaps are possible, right? So if you master this stuff, what you see Elyssa doing in her business and in her life and the TEDx talk and like all of that comes from doing this work. So it works and it works magic. I've seen this type of work magically overnight when your attitude completely changes towards something. And now all of a sudden you're in a completely new path. I've seen that happen. So thank you for sharing that with us because now everybody knows we're walking them up. Can you please tell everybody where to go and find you and follow you and what you have
Absolutely.
going on?
Thank you so much. Those are such sweet words. Thank you so much. So I would love to see you over on Instagram or LinkedIn. LinkedIn, it's Elyssa Smith, Elyssa. My name is a little funky. And then Elyssa C. Smith on Instagram. And for any women listening who you want to just like be around this vibe a little bit more, we have, I go live weekly in my free community on Facebook. It's called the Stress Less Lounge. And we would love to welcome you in there.
And I'm going to put all of those links below. Thank you so much, my friend, for coming today. You are amazing.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.